Welcome back to the Daily Dope. I'm your friendly commentator, Brian Strong, and just to let you know, I wasn't really thinking about this story too much more, but since it is a huge issue to a lot of people, and let's face it, New York is a major, like one of the biggest states we got, population-wise. And like I said yesterday when I made the original video about what Cynthia Nixon was saying, is that this is historical shit here. This marijuana issue being brought front and center in the New York governor's race. So let me catch up anybody who isn't up to speed with what's going on so far. I found this little clip here. Just summarizes what we know so far. Hell no. And of course it's from a shady thing that they're trying to worry about how many times you watch videos at their website. Oh, here we go.
In a video released online Wednesday morning, Cynthia Nixon got fired up about legalizing marijuana.
In 2018, in a blue state like New York, marijuana shouldn't even be an issue. If there was more political courage coming out of Albany, we would have done this a long time ago.
Governor Cuomo has previously opposed full legalization. Just last year, he called marijuana, quote, a gateway drug. At an unrelated event on Long Island, Cuomo was asked if New York is a little behind other states on this issue.
No, I think we're actually ahead on it. We announced months ago that we were going to study the legalization issue precisely for that reason.
Governor Andrew Cuomo.
In January, Cuomo announced the state would authorize a study as part of the budget, but funding for that study was left out. And the study wasn't to look at legalizing marijuana in New York, but how legalization in neighboring states could affect the state's economy. The Cuomo administration now says its own Department of Health will study the issue and report back in the fall.
I'm trying to depoliticize the issue and say, let's get the facts. We now have states that have legalized marijuana.
Cuomo did sign off on a medical marijuana program for New York State in 2014, but he often referred to that program as the most restrictive in the nation, and it is. The state's medical marijuana program does not even allow the drug to be smoked. And despite Cuomo's claims, New York is not actually ahead of other states on the issue. 9 other states and the District of Columbia have already legalized recreational use of the drug. Some on the left consider legalization a key progressive issue.
There are a lot of good reasons for legalizing marijuana. But for me, it comes down to this. We have to stop putting people of color in jail for something that white people do with impunity.
Now, last year, Governor Cuomo did propose decriminalizing possession of small amounts of marijuana, but it died in the legislature. But just to give you a sense of how quickly things are moving on this issue, recently First Lady Chirlane McCray called for full legalization. And just on Wednesday, former House Speaker Republican John Boehner joined a company that distributes cannabis. On the east side, Zach Fink, New York 1.
Okay, so now we have an update. Now, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the New York Post. But this is pretty sensational sounding. All right. Cuomo lays groundwork for legalizing marijuana. Not sure about this. This guy seems to write basically run-of-the-mill everyday stories about New York City and the greater New York area. I mean, I don't see anything about this guy's work that would make me think that this is a fake story or fake or sensationalized headline or anything like that. But when I look at the list of articles about this, let me see, is this it? There isn't really anything on it. Oh, that's the videos. All right, so we look at it, and it's just basically all you really see is yesterday's stuff. That's not even the same shit. That's the Boehner stuff. Well, anyway, just get right back. Let's just get right to this New York Post article, because I just want to make this short and sweet little update. A apparently, Cuomo has made some statements since the famous video and tweet session that Cynthia Nixon laid on us yesterday. So let's check this out. Governor Andrew Cuomo laid the groundwork Thursday for legalizing marijuana in New York, saying neighboring states already have or are about to. So, for all intents and purposes, it's going to be here anyway. Now, what I don't like about these statements coming out of Cuomo is the tact. You know, just like when he's talking to reporters that do reporting on cannabis and they want to ask him questions, he stoner shames them and picks on their integrity and their intellectual capacity based on old stereotypes from the 1930s. So the government's comments were his strongest to date in favor of legalization and came just a day after Democratic rival Cynthia Nixon changed that current marijuana laws discriminate against minorities. Quote, "The facts have changed," Cuomo said during a stop in Brooklyn to spotlight new subway equipment. You have states that have legalized it now. It is no longer a question of legal or illegal. It's legal in Massachusetts. It may be legal in New Jersey, which means for all intents and purposes, it's going to be here anyway, he says. Now, there's a couple things I want to go back here and look at. So his tact totally ignored the Nixon video. It's like he's making these statements in a vacuum almost, because he doesn't necessarily answer any of the concerns that she raised with the video. He's just saying, hey, look, everybody's doing it around us, so we might as well, take advantage of it being something that we can make money off of rather than export all of our dollars to New Jersey and Massachusetts and, quite frankly, Vermont and anyone else around you. Pennsylvania looks like they might, if you don't watch it, they might get there first. Connecticut, even Rhode Island. I mean, if you look at it like this, like if Cuomo gets reelected, he could kick the can down the road again and basically not even legalize marijuana in his whole next term. It's possible. He's that big of a prohibitionist. But the way he's framing this argument, it makes me feel like he is throwing the towel in. And he also realizes that this issue is that serious. And when I tweeted about this earlier, I said something along the lines of, look, direct action actually works. And what I meant by that was that Cynthia Nixon is a Democratic challenger to the sitting incumbent, highly popular. I don't know how popular. I'm not a New York resident. But let's just say that he's a well-liked, hasn't done anything too concerning that people are like, he doesn't have it's not a rotten egg kind of vote when people are going to go vote for him if the Republican's not totally repulsive. And quite frankly, I don't really know. It seems like a Republican, if they were charming enough, might be able to beat him. Because it seems like we have this revolving door with Cuomo family members versus billionaire Republicans that keep getting, it's like a revolving door over there. But anyway, so, what are we doing here? Cuomo got challenged by Cynthia Nixon, who has celebrity status, and I mean, she's really on the scene in New York. She is kind of politically active a little bit from time to time. But now that she's running for governor, she went straight at him with the marijuana issue, which is, quite frankly, a huge deal because you're sitting there, governor of New York City, New York State, one of the supposed most liberal states in the country, one of the most populated states in the country, and quite frankly, one of the biggest economies in the world. And you're just going to let marijuana legalization happen all around you. So that's his tact, that he's not, that's why he's throwing in the towel. He's not going to mention anything she said, and he's definitely doesn't mention anything about this 80% black and brown people getting all the weed charges and doing all the weed jail and prison and the courts and all that. Oops. So I usually don't have my phone sitting there. Ooh, anyway, he don't mention that at all. And he don't mention the tax revenue. I mean, you might look at it like he's saying, hey, we don't want all of our people that smoke weed here going over there to New Jersey or Massachusetts to buy the weed. We're going to lose a lot of money. Now, the thing about this is he's saying that it's going to be legal here and there. It's going to be here anyway. That's another thing I wanted to hit head on. Hey, man, it already is there anyway. How can I tell? Well, because you guys make an average of, I don't know, like 100,000 arrests a year or some shit for marijuana. Like, New York is one of the most ridiculous places on the planet for marijuana arrests. The numbers are astronomical. They're off all the charts. And when you look, like I said earlier, the black and brown numbers, 80%. And like I said in the video yesterday, I don't want to sound too repetitive to people who watch all my videos or seen the one yesterday, but I know I lived in New York State, and I've lived in upstate, and I lived in New York City. I lived in 3 boroughs. It's simply a white state. There's way more white people than anybody else. New York City is very diverse, but there's still a fuck ton of white people there. It's like everywhere you turn, there's white people everywhere. So, yeah, man, the 80%, it's something that Cuomo should have mentioned at least. I mean, show where you're at. We know Cuomo's got some credentials when it comes to identity politics type issues, but this is one where, to me, this is one of the most pressing issues that faces minority communities. And why? Because you just got to look at the numbers, the sheer numbers of prison and jail and court cases and all this that is being, the burden of this prohibition is being carried on the backs of young black and Latino males and females. But I mean, the lion's share of these charges and court cases and all this shit, it's just it's atrocious to look at, because marijuana, let's face it, is being consumed by all races equally. Marijuana has a subset in all demographics of people that use it, whether you're talking about, well, Christians don't use weed. Well, you want to know what? A certain percentage of them do. And that's the way it is with all religions, all races, all whatever. You can divide up people by. That shit don't matter between the relationship between a plant and a person. And when it comes to that, it comes down to this, man. A certain amount of the population is always, and always has been, and always will be, people that are prone to like to consume cannabis, quite frankly. And there's a lot of reasons that you would know why if you don't smoke weed, and you was wondering why that is. So let's go ahead and read the rest of this. It's not very long. The governor went on to say, the question now is, do you not legalize it when it's legal 10 miles from both sides of your border, assuming the Garden State becomes the 9th in the nation to make recreational pot legally available? It is also legal in Washington, D.C. Nixon put Cuomo on the defensive this week when she released a campaign video calling for the legalization of cannabis and as a matter of racial justice. Quote, there's a lot of good reasons for legalizing marijuana, but for me, it comes down to this. We have to stop putting people in color for jail for something that white people do with impunity, the actress said in the video. Cuomo appointed a commission to study the issue earlier this year. He responded to Nixon by pointing to that commission. Quote, let's get the facts and make a decision based on the facts, he said on the Long Island Wednesday. We now have states that have legalized marijuana. Let's look at the facts and see what happened there. 24 hours later in Brooklyn, the governor went a lot further. Quote, the situation has changed dramatically with marijuana, he said. Nixon plans to challenge Cuomo in September's Democratic primary. So that's pretty much it. And I mean, I like I said, I looked around and I tried to find more about this whole thing where he's at this, subway equipment spotlight press conference or whatever you want to call it in Brooklyn. And now, I did mention this other article yesterday about how people are starting to notice that Cuomo's campaign for re-election, he hasn't even really got it put together. You don't have nothing going on in that way. And I don't think he expected this much of a challenge in the primary, perhaps. And even with Cynthia Nixon throwing her hat in, he probably still wasn't thinking that that was a serious challenge, you know. But when somebody is running for office in the Democratic Party and they actually start talking about issues, that's when the incumbents that they're running against in challenges like this start to freak out. And that's when the DCCC, which is the DNC's funding arm, if you will, they're the kind of people that like find out who the candidates are. They back certain candidates. They also receive funds from candidates so that they can fund other candidates and help races. And on paper, it looks like it's supposed to work pretty good, but really what they're out there doing is they find races like this and then they squash the progressive candidate in favor of the corporate candidate. And in this case, Cuomo is the corporate candidate. He didn't think much of the challenge, but when she brought the issue of legalizing marijuana forefront, now he's looking like he can just brush it off. Oh, yeah, please, I might as well legalize it. Everybody else is. What's the holdup, right? Let's do this. And, you know, the funny part about it is this is a September primary. So we have all summer in the session of your state house, the whole session, to sit around and see what you guys are actually going to do in that manner, in that regard. And if it looks like things that, I mean, she's running against you, man. If it looks like you're doing if you're just saying this, and this is just some fancy thing to say on a Tuesday or whatever, it was a Thursday or whatever, you're just like waking up and thinking, man, I'm just going to make this go away and just say, yeah, okay, we're going to legalize it. And then boom, it's going to go away. Well, you know, your exploratory committee, we found out about that. We just seen in that other video that they're looking at all the wrong things. And even if they start looking at the right things, I don't feel like you know what the right things are. Like you say, you're going to study places that have already legalized it. I feel like you're going to look at those places and talk to the wrong people, and they're going to tell you what they think is doing bad. And, you know, I mean, whatever it comes down to is we want to maintain a setup where safe access is a thing. And now when you look at your medical marijuana program, safe access is not a thing. There is literally no access. Your medical marijuana program is garbage. So it would help to start there. Like a lot of places when they talk about, oh, should we legalize recreational or what? And they end up saying, you know, it seems like a kick the can down the road thing like they did in Maryland. And they were like, well, you know, we better get our medical marijuana program together first. And that's what they're basically doing in New Jersey, is they're ironing that shit out because the programs were terrible. And that's what New York's is. It's total garbage. For the people, you know, that need medical marijuana, it's not there for them. You know, they're buying bud on the street, or they're buying whatever medical marijuana product they consume or need. They're buying that on the street in the black market. It's there. And it's probably more expensive than it even would be if New York had a regulated market. So, all right, I'm trying to make this as short as possible. Good luck with all that, Cuomo. We're watching you, though. We got our eyes on you. So Cynthia Nixon is right around the corner to bite your ass if you don't do this. And what I'm expecting is full on, like, get to work. Like I just said in the video yesterday, like, you know, you're not trying to legalize marijuana if you say, oh, we're going to do an exploratory committee and look into it. That's not legalizing marijuana. That's doing the exact opposite. That's not legalizing marijuana. That's doing an exploratory committee looking into it. Legalizing marijuana would be like, okay, at this date and time, that's when it's legal. We're no longer going to write tickets for this shit. And here's what we're not writing tickets for, and have a list of that. And then you're going to say, well, and we're going to have the legislator hammering out regulations. That's what a leader does. You don't say, well, we're going to look into it. That's a blow off. So don't blow us off no more. Get on it. And if you don't, Cynthia Nixon is on your ass.